I transmigrated into a novel. The good news is, I became the rich heir of a powerful family. The bad news, I'm actually the real young master who was switched at birth, hated by everyone. Worse still, the story is about to end. According to the original plot, the fake young master is about to inherit the family business, and my girlfriend, Willow, the moment she hears the Wong family abandoned me, immediately dumps me and runs off with the fake heir. The subtext of what she says is clear: she wants to be Mrs. Wong. As for who Mr. Wong is, that doesn't matter. Meanwhile, I'm kicked out of the house, homeless and wandering, fighting stray dogs for scraps in the trash. Such a tragic storyline leaves me with zero will to live. I look up at the bright blue sky, my expression peaceful and calm, ready to give up and follow the path of the original protagonist. As I seriously debated whether dying in a car crash or jumping off a building would be more dignified, a group of passing robbers dragged me into their van. One of them pulled out a knife and pressed it to my throat, grinning wickedly as he said, "Don't move. This is a robbery. Call your family and get them to send $5 million for your ransom. If you dare scream for help, I'll send you straight to hell." Looks like the heavens do have a plan after all. I smiled in relief and nodded, then opened my mouth and shouted at the top of my lungs, "Help!" Chapter 01. The scream was sharp enough to tear through eardrums, leaving the two robbers stunned on the spot. One of them quickly slapped a hand over my mouth to muffle me, growling viciously, "Wanna die now or what?" I shook my head hard, eyes gleaming with anticipation as I struggled to mumble, "Really? I don't believe you. Go ahead. Prove it." To my disappointment, the robber had no intention of doing so. Instead, he pulled my phone out of my pocket, unlocked it by scanning my ready-to-die face, then slid his thumb to call the most recent contact, Alicia. After an agonizing wait, just before the call was about to disconnect, it finally connected. Before the robber could say a word, Alicia's shrill voice exploded in the cramped van like a banshee on steroids. "George, can you stop clinging to me like a damn piece of tape? How many times do I have to tell you, I will never acknowledge you as my brother in this life?" That last line was shouted with such righteousness it echoed. The robber blinked, clearly caught off guard by her aggressive energy, but staying professional, he snarled into the phone, "We've got your brother. If you don't cough up $5 million, we'll kill him." Alicia scoffed, her voice rising another octave. "George, is this your brilliant new scam? Faking your own kidnapping to get money? Huh? I'm telling you, cut the crap. It's so fake. Besides setting up shady traps for Makoto, what else can you do? You want to kill him? Go ahead. We're not paying a single cent." From the other end, the fake young master, Makoto, spoke gently. "Sis, maybe he's just doing this to get attention. Let's just check on him. If he gets desperate and does something reckless, it might get serious." Alicia lowered her voice and said, "Makoto, you're just too kind. Someone like him, a cowardly leech who only thinks about how to suck more money out of the Wong family. You really think someone like that got kidnapped? This is just a bad script he wrote and starred in himself." Then the call cut off abruptly. Silence fell in the van. After a long pause, one of the robbers turned to the other and asked, "Didn't they say George was the real heir of the Wong family? Why does it seem like the family prefers that imposter instead?" They both turned to look at me, scanning me from head to toe. I stared back solemnly, then reminded them to show some basic respect for their own profession. I said, "What are you staring at? Hurry up and kill me. There's only 30 minutes until sunset. If you wait too long, are you planning to spend $20 feeding me dinner too?" Chapter 02. As long as they kill me, I can finally be free of this hated by everyone identity. I do feel a little sorry for the original protagonist who's now missing, but honestly, I have no desire to keep struggling in this world. Before I transmigrated, I was just a 9 to 5 corporate drone. No parents, no family, no friends, no brothers. All I had was a life of lonely, repetitive commutes between work and home, and a growing sense of exhaustion and confusion about the future. Until one day, while crossing the street, a car ran a red light and slammed into me. At that moment, I felt an uncanny calmness inside, as if a faint beam of light pierced the darkness and led me out of my suffocating life, giving my heart, long drowned in seawater, a moment of relief. Who would have thought, when I opened my eyes again, I'd landed in an even harder mode of hell. At the same time, a book appeared in my mind, standing quietly like a monument. It told me I had become a universally hated character in a novel, a real heir switched at birth by a nanny. After enduring 18 miserable years in an orphanage, he finally found his biological parents. But sadly, just like in real-life cases, his parents had already formed deep emotional bonds with the adoptive son. They barely knew their real child. The initial joy of reunion faded quickly in the face of complicated feelings. Their guilt toward their biological son came from the pain he had endured, but to send away the adopted son to make up for it meant they'd have to be the ones making that decision. So, Like most wealthy families, they didn't send the adopted child away. They just decided to treat both boys as their own. But the real young master who had vanished for 18 years could never match up to the fake one who had grown up with elite education and etiquette. A swan living among crows long enough will have its feathers tainted black, filth that can never be washed clean. Meanwhile, the crow living among swans, cultivated by their love and training day after day, eventually opens pure white wings and blends into the flock. Labeled crude and unpresentable, the real young master, deemed worthless, was kicked out and left to roam the streets. Everyone turned away from him and gathered around the impeccably dressed, graceful fake young master, singing endless praises. At the end of the book, there was only a single, dismissive line. George, who tried so hard to gain everyone's attention, was finally thrown out by the Wongs. Penniless, he wandered the streets and eventually died at the hands of the kidnappers who never got the ransom. After reading that, I turned my hopeful gaze toward the two robbers in front of me. After I requested to be killed, the van once again fell into a weird silence. The two buzzcut men huddled together, whispering for a long time, and then made a decision completely different from the original plot. They weren't going to kill me. They were going to rob a jewelry store first, to make some fast cash. The younger one hesitated. Big bro, I thought we agreed to just extort ransom. Now we're straight up robbing a store. I don't know how to do that. The older one smacked him on the head, furious. Isn't it all about making money? What's the difference? We'll just use this guy as a hostage. Grab the gold, then run. Still worried, the younger one asked. What if we can't get away? The older one replied confidently. No worries. I checked, detention centers in the capital have better meals than anywhere else. I swear, you'll eat oily dishes 3 times a day. Besides, I flew across the country to bring you here. It'd be a waste if you didn't try. The younger one nodded, touched. Then he turned to me and, seeing my "I've given up on life" expression, threatened. Just behave later. Got it? If you cooperate and act like a good hostage, we'll let you go afterward. I asked. Can you grant me a small wish? He replied. Say it. I had no interest in following any extra plot lines. By the end of the book, there wasn't a single word about me anymore. With a sincere heart, I said earnestly, since I'll be working so hard as your hostage, after the robbery, can you do me a favor and stab me to death? The robbers were speechless. Chapter 03. The jewelry store robbery went surprisingly smoothly. The two robbers worked in perfect sync. One smashed at the glass with a sledgehammer, while the other was tugging and struggling with me. Still gripping his knife, he yelled, "That's my knife, let go." I replied sincerely, "Bro, you just need to swipe it across my neck. Quick and easy, it won't take much of your time." He cursed. "Get lost. Robbery and murder ain't the same thing. You can't fool me into stepping on the sewing machine for longer inside." Meanwhile, a crowd had already formed outside, chatting and pointing like they were at a festival. One person said, "Wow, such a primitive robbery method." Another commented, "See that shatterproof glass? Not easy to break. Look how exhausted the guy is, been smashing for ages and still hasn't broken a single panel." And someone else added, "Welcome to the stream, babies. Today we're live streaming a jewelry heist. Smash that follow button. Big thanks to our top supporter, Alicia, for the Heart Bunny gift. To answer your question, we're broadcasting live from the corner of South Alley Street. Besides me, there was another girl still inside the store who hadn't escaped in time. Dressed head to toe in expensive designer brands, she was clearly used to a pampered life. Now, she squatted on the floor, trembling, eyes full of fear and a hint of admiration, watching me wrestle over the knife with the robber. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. As the sound of police sirens drew nearer, the robber who had failed to break even one piece of glass finally snapped in frustration. He pulled out a switchblade from his pocket and swept the room with a vicious glare. Then, like a madman, he lunged and grabbed the squatting girl, shouting with murderous rage, "If I'm going to prison, I'm taking someone with me." The flash of the spring-loaded blade drained all color from the girl's face, while I, on the other hand, was practically elated. The moment I'd been waiting for had finally arrived, late, but not missing. If I died fast enough, I could even save money on dinner tonight. Goodbye, original body. If I run into the original protagonist on the road to the underworld, maybe we can catch up. The switchblade was raised high. In the chorus of screams, I lunged forward, throwing myself in front of the girl like a true martyr. Screams rang out all around. I felt the cold steel pierce into my abdomen. Warm, sticky blood began to flow out slowly. The blood loss made my head spin, just like when I was hit by that car in the original world. That same eerie sense of calm washed over me. Everything in the world lost its color. The view before my eyes cracked into 1,000 razor-sharp shards. I closed my eyes, a peaceful smile on my lips. Letting out a long sigh, I whispered, "Finally. I'm dying." My body slowly went limp. To the sound of the girl's tearful screams, I slipped into unconsciousness. Right before I fully lost consciousness, I thought I saw a woman anxiously pushing through the crowd, stumbling to my side with panic written all over her face. She shouted in terror, "Why are you all just standing there? Call 911, now." Chapter 04. From the way her features resemble mine by about 50%, I figure this must be Alicia, the character described in the book, the original protagonist's biological older sister. But Alicia would never look at me with worry in her eyes. According to the novel, ever since the original protagonist returned to the Wang family, the person who hated him the most was her. On the very day he was brought back into the Wang household, Makoto, the fake heir who had lived under their roof for 18 years, stormed out that same night. When the family finally found him after searching all night, Makoto was drunk out of his mind, disheveled like a stray dog. With a trembling voice, he choked out, "Mom, Dad, Sis. I thought you didn't want me anymore." Alicia clung to him, heart aching, then turned her furious gaze toward the original protagonist and shouted, "This is all your fault. You hillbilly, don't think that just because you share blood with our parents you get to bully Makoto. Let me tell you, blood ties can never compete with 18 years of shared memories." Back then, the original protagonist stood awkwardly in the lavish Wang family living room, wearing a cheap t-shirt and worn-out shoes. His only belongings were in a shabby bundle at his feet. The central AC made his body hair stand on end, yet not one person even looked at him properly. Someone like that, who didn't fit into the upper-class world at all, was bound to be disliked. No surprise everyone silently resented his sudden reappearance, breaking the long-standing peace of the Wang household. From that day forward, the original protagonist began a year-long journey of groveling and trying to win back the family's affection. But all he got in return were looks of contempt and cruel nicknames: loser, embarrassment, dead weight. In the end, he was accused of bullying and framing Makoto. The Wangs kicked him out with nothing, no home, no family, no support. Now it's me who's inherited this tragic fate. Sorry, but this dull, colorless path. The original protagonist may have walked it. But I won't stay here even a minute longer. Chapter 05. The strong stench of antiseptic filled my nose. I forced my eyes open, and turning my head, I saw Alicia's face, her brows slightly creased in concern. All this overtreatment. I just wanted to die. And somehow they made it look like I was fighting to live. I finally ran into some robbers, yet the knife missed every vital organ. Only a minor flesh wound. If I want to pull off a fake death and vanish act, I'll have to try again. In the original plot, George dies at the hands of the robbers when the ransom never comes. But something must have gone wrong. I was captured by the same kind of criminals. Yet here I am, completely fine. Did I not cooperate enough? Was my desire to die not obvious enough? This unexpected vitality was deeply irritating. Alicia's voice made it worse, harsh and grating as she snapped, "George, if you didn't keep doing attention-seeking crap with zero dignity, maybe we wouldn't have just stood by while you nearly died." I cut her off coldly. "Shut up." The original George tried so hard to please them. "I won't." Lying on the too-soft hospital bed, something was digging uncomfortably into my neck. I reached up and tugged. Turns out, it was some kind of worn-out charm for peace and safety. Its cloth was faded, threadbare. The deep red silk had long lost its luster. Something hard was tucked inside. I didn't inherit the original George's memories, but this ragged little thing felt annoying and useless. So I ripped it off and casually tossed it away. It flew through the air in a perfect arc. Alicia's words suddenly died in her throat. The moment she saw me throw away the charm, her eyes locked onto my face, unblinking. Her voice trembled as she asked, "George, did you really just throw that peace charm away?" Chapter 06. I asked, "What else would I do?" I looked up, genuinely confused. It was poking me and uncomfortable. Why wouldn't I throw it away? I've already suffered enough. Dragged inexplicably into this strange world, made into some universally hated problem child. And now I don't even have the right to toss out a crappy peace charm. I don't even want to keep living. Why would I care about a faded little charm? Alicia's voice rose sharply with frustration. "George, do you seriously not remember where that peace charm came from?" I lazily lifted my eyelids and replied calmly, "No, I don't." A thick book stands like a monolith in my mind. I've got zero patience to comb through it in detail. All I've done is skim the plot and get a rough understanding of this world and the misfortunes that befell the original George. As for that peace charm, if it was ever mentioned, it was a passing footnote. It didn't leave the slightest impression on me. Alicia looked visibly pissed, her face flushing red with emotion. She stood up and stared hard at my indifferent expression, clearly trying to find even a flicker of guilt or pretense in my face. But my utter calm told her all she needed to know. "I really didn't remember," she snapped, kicking the charm aside and scoffing. "Wow, George, you've really stepped up your acting. Let me guess, those robbers. Hired actors, right? All just part of another pathetic stunt to get our attention and crawl your way back into the Wong family. She sneered again. Honestly, it's a good thing we kept Makoto 18 years ago instead of a born troublemaker like you. No matter how sharp Alicia's words were, they failed to stir anything in me. I had no plans of staying in this world anyway. I ignored her entirely and scanned the room. The hospital ward was on the 18th floor. A lucky number. Supposedly, the window opened wide enough. Easily enough space for me to slip through. Sorry, doctors and nurses. I'm about to waste your hard work and precious time. Outside, the evening sky burned red with scattered clouds. If I'm going to die, no need to wait for an ideal day. No better moment than now. I pressed a hand to my wound and slowly dragged myself to the window. Alicia, still standing there, rolled her eyes, watching me hobble forward. She laughed bitterly. Oh, keep it up, keep acting. What now, planning your next scheme? You really will stop at nothing for the Wong family's money, huh? George. Her sarcasm was cut short, collapsing into a gasp of sheer terror, reflected in her wide, panicked eyes. I took a deep breath, my expression softened. I closed my eyes, and in one swift motion, I climbed through the window and threw myself into the sky. Chapter 07. The light, drifting sensation of falling suddenly stopped short. A sharp pain shot through my arm, muscles pulling tight. I opened my eyes in frustration and looked up. Alicia's face was flushed red with strain. She was gripping my arm tightly, panic and terror written all over her expression. Her eyes were reddened, her voice hoarse as she screamed for help. I, on the other hand, said flatly, "Let go." Her fingers clenched even tighter. Her voice trembled, obviously breaking, as she said, "George, I won't. It was my fault before. Just please don't do anything rash. Okay, I swear I'll pull you back up." With the help of the doctors and nurses who had rushed in, they finally dragged me back in from the window and into the hospital room. My arm, nearly pulled out of its socket, throbbed in pain. The moment I hit the ground, I fell in a tangled heap, completely disheveled. Alicia clung to me, trembling uncontrollably in the aftermath. Her eyes welled up with tears. She shouted in near hysteria, "Are you out of your mind? This is the 18th floor. If I hadn't grabbed you in time, you would have ended up a pile of blood and broken bones." Then, as if something suddenly occurred to her, the color drained from her lips. She stared at my calm, detached expression. Her voice shook as she whispered, "George, I thought you were just acting again, just another stunt to get our attention, but you really wanted to die." The realization made her voice trail off into incoherent panic. I stared at her, confused. Alicia had hated the original George for as long as he'd been in the Wong family. If I were really dead, wouldn't that make her happy? Why did she look so full of regret? Before I could process any of it, the strain from everything caught up to me. My still healing wound tore open again. Blood seeped out slowly, blooming red like plum blossoms on my gown. The world around me blurred. My eyes rolled back. And then, I completely blacked out. Chapter 08. When I woke up again, I was in the Wong family's villa. A spacious, bright bedroom, but not the one the original George used to stay in. Though I didn't inherit his memories, I'd seen it described in the original plot. The room he lived in was no bigger than a walk-in closet, about the same size as Makoto's dressing room, originally meant for the household staff. After the real young master returned, unwelcomed by all, that tiny, cramped room became his so-called home. Not a trace of late-bloomed familial affection ever appeared. All he got were looks of disgust and disdain. When the lights of the day dimmed and night fell, I could clearly hear the argument coming from the living room. Alicia's voice rang out, emotional. "George really doesn't want to live anymore. He almost died in front of me, twice, today." Then came Mr. Wong's stern voice, full of authority. "George may be my biological son, but from the moment I first laid eyes on him, I could see all the bad traits carved into his bones. Kid's already been corrupted. Why else would he come knocking on our door? Of course it's for our money," he scoffed. "All this talk about suicide, it's just him trying to make a scene, get media attention, and pressure us into handing over cash." To be fair, Mr. Wong wasn't wrong about one thing. It was the original George who sought out the Wong family. He'd caught a glimpse of his biological father's face on TV, and the resemblance was so uncanny, like they were stamped from the same mold, that the orphan boy, now 18, decided to take a shot and see if fate was real. And as for the money, come on, the kid was still in high school. Without money, how was he supposed to survive? The Wongs had lived their whole lives in wealth. Chauffeurs at the door, luxury cars for every trip, hundreds of thousands in dividends deposited monthly, more reliable than meals for a malnourished orphan. Even Alicia and Makoto received 50,000 yuan a month just as allowance. Designer clothes, accessories, Everything they bought was paid with Mr. Wang's black card, but the original George? Even 1 yuan for the bus, he had to earn it himself. On his first day at the Wang estate, he opened his mouth and asked Mr. Wang for 10,000 yuan. It wasn't for anything extravagant, just to pay his tuition and cover basic living expenses for half a semester. What he got instead was a wave of ridicule. Mr. Wang said, "Can't even pretend for 1 day. Huh? Already begging for money the moment you step through the door." In the end, he threw the money at George from above like tossing scraps to a beggar, and still found time to add, "You reek of desperation and greed. Honestly, that nanny swapping you out 18 years ago might have been the best thing that ever happened to this family." Now imagine how painful that must have been to hear, for the original George, but thankfully, I'm not him. In the living room, Alicia pressed her lips into a hard line. The corners of her eyes were red. She shouted, "Dad, George wasn't faking it. That was the 18th floor. If the doctors had come just a second later, he would have ended up as nothing but a smear of blood on the pavement." She paused, voice cracking. No one throws themselves off an 18th floor window unless they're carrying a world of pain. Even now, her hands still trembled slightly. Just remembering that gut-wrenching moment had left her pale as a ghost. Shock spread across the faces in the room. The Wangs, who had always worn disgust and annoyance like armor, were now frozen with disbelief. I quietly pushed open the door. The timing couldn't have been worse, but I cleared my throat and asked awkwardly, "Sorry to interrupt, but may I leave now?" Chapter 09. Everyone looked even more shocked. After all, they were used to seeing me, the old George, constantly groveling, trying desperately to please the Wang family, only to screw it up again and again. Now, seeing me suddenly so indifferent, wanting nothing from them, they didn't quite know how to react. But I wasn't the original George. I had zero emotional expectations from these people. Silence filled the living room. Makoto, who had been sitting beside Mr. Wang, narrowed his eyes slightly. Then, as if struck by grief, he put on a sorrowful face and said, "This is Big Brother's home. Of course he should stay. I'm the one who should leave. The engagement with the Liu family, that should be his as well." His words were laced with subtle manipulation, hitting the parents right where it hurt. They immediately snapped out of their daze, and the momentary hesitation on their faces froze back into ice. Mrs. Wang closed her eyes in feigned heartache, then looked at me with visible disgust and said, "I know what you're thinking. You're not just trying to push Makoto out to steal the inheritance. You're even eyeing your own brother's fiancée. Ever since you forced your way back into this family, you've been scheming nonstop to frame your brother, doing everything you can to kick him out. We used to have a peaceful home, until you showed up and ruined everything." I tuned her out completely, my heart as still as water. I didn't even glance at these people, just walked past them toward the door. But Alicia suddenly grabbed my wrist from behind. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at me and said, "George, I don't believe what they say. I don't believe you're like that. I believe in you." I didn't need her belief. All I knew was, staying here would only delay my plan to disappear. But Alicia went as far as to call the bodyguards to block my way. In the end, under Makoto's hateful stare, I was forced to stay at the Wang estate, all because they were scared I'd try something again. Chapter 10. Now that I was back in the Wang home, my treatment was slightly better than the original George's. I was moved from a servant's room on the first floor to a guest bedroom on the second floor, but it didn't take long for the whole family to realize something was off about me. Back when the original George lived here, he did a ton of chores, hunting in the hills, fishing in rivers, digging up every flower in the garden just to plant wild vegetables so he could cook for them. And what did they give him in return? Insults. They mocked him for being uncultured, saying he was born to do farm work. So naturally, I didn't bother with any of that pointless effort. Once I moved in, I went full lie-flat mode and didn't lift a finger. The next morning, I slept until the sun was high in the sky. My stomach wound barely hurt anymore. When I finally came downstairs, I heard Mrs. Wang's disapproving voice from the living room. "Sleeping in this late, where's your sense of discipline?" Makoto, ever the gentle white lotus, covered his mouth and said softly, "Mom, George got hurt yesterday." Mrs. Wang scoffed. "Who believes that? That wound is probably fake." "George, go to the kitchen and make me some breakfast." Years of drinking and entertaining in business had wrecked Mrs. Wang's stomach, so she was extremely picky about food. In the original story, George personally cooked for her every day, delicate, nourishing meals made just the way she liked. Complicated, tiring, and thankless. My eyes swept over her with cold indifference. I said flatly, "Mrs. Wang, I'm not here applying for a job as your chef. If you want me to cook, you'll need to pay me market rate." Makoto jumped in to defend her. "Big brother, how can you talk to mom like that?" I looked at the smug, self-righteous glint in his eyes and replied evenly, "She's your mom, not mine." Chapter 11. Mrs. Wang stood frozen in place. What truly shocked her wasn't that I refused to cook. It was the fact that I no longer called her Mom. Even when the original George was getting kicked out of the Wong family over Makoto, he still called her Mom with hopeful sincerity. Now, those once yearning cries of Mom had been replaced by a cold, emotionless Mrs. Wong. I went to the dining room alone and casually grabbed some cold toast and milk from the table, stuffing it into my mouth. Corporate life had trained me well. I didn't fuss over food. The goal of eating was purely survival. Makoto, seeing that I no longer clung to Mrs. Wong like before, immediately seized the moment to play his usual performance. He came over to me, eyes filled with artificial guilt, and said, "Big brother, I know you've always liked Miss Lu, but we're getting engaged in a couple of days. Let's not let something small like this ruin our brotherly bond." He stared into my eyes, practically begging for a reaction, waiting for me to flare up, accuse him of stealing what was mine, so he could pretend to take the high road and offer a fake, magnanimous concession, and make himself look even more virtuous in front of Mrs. Wong, so that she'd be even more convinced. I was beyond saving, but after hearing him out, my eyes lit up, not with anger, but calculation. Now that I was living under the Wong roof, Alicia had turned into something like a 24/7 security camera, watching my every move. Terrified I'd try to kill myself again. Even staying an extra minute in the bathroom would have her banging on the door like a SWAT raid. But on the day Makoto and Miss Lu got engaged, with a mansion full of guests and all eyes elsewhere, wouldn't that be the perfect opportunity to leave this world? As for whether I liked Miss Lu, I let out a cold, dry laugh. My mind was a blank slate. I didn't even know what she looked like, so how the hell could I possibly like her? Chapter 12. The engagement between the Wong and Lu families had been planned over a decade ago. They were just waiting for Miss Lu to turn 18, and now, the union was finally official. The banquet hall was lavishly decorated for the occasion. Makoto, dressed in a sharp suit, sat at a gleaming grand piano in the center of the stage. A spotlight shone down on him, drawing every envious gaze in the room. His fingers danced across the keys, playing a piano piece with effortless elegance, fluid and flawless. I sat quietly in the far corner, and in that moment, I suddenly understood why the original George had been so unwilling to let go. Makoto had grown up pampered. His allowance was more than he could ever spend. His parents poured endless money and energy into shaping him, layer after layer of polish, until he became this dazzling figure, soaking in everyone's admiration. All of this should have belonged to the original George. The life he was meant to have was stolen and replaced with hunger, beatings, and fights in a cold orphanage, while Makoto received a 300,000 yuan motorcycle for his birthday. George was in the middle of a bloody brawl over a 50-cent candy, and even after managing to find his real family, his parents dismissed him as crude and unrefined. In a world where value was everything, he had none. Everyone hated him. Worst of all, the nanny who had switched the babies was long dead. Nothing remained but two boys living swapped lives, and no way to make it right. The song ended. Makoto walked over to me with a smile, straightening his collar. "Big brother," he asked, "how was my performance?" I swallowed a piece of roast meat, wiped my mouth, and said with a puzzled look, "It was fine. Sounded like you were fluffing cotton. If you've got nothing better to do, might as well chew on some lighters." Makoto could barely keep up his pretentious facade. He leaned closer, voice low and gritted between his teeth. "George, you came back too late. In this world, not even your biological parents will care about someone who brings nothing to the table. You understand that, right?" He wasn't wrong. To the Wongs, I was worth nothing. Whispers from the crowd floated into my ears, not even bothering to keep quiet around me. "That's the real Wong son, right?" "Yeah, totally rough and uncultured. I heard he grew up in an orphanage and asked for money the first day he came home. Raised outside for too long, already ruined. If I were the Wongs, I wouldn't claim someone like that either." Embarrassing. They weren't lying. The Wongs had never liked me. To a wealthy family, a child either expands the business or forges powerful alliances. If you can't do either, you're just dead weight. But the feeling was mutual. To me, the prestigious Wong family meant nothing. In this room full of people raising their champagne glasses, showering each other in fake praise, I quietly slipped out through the back door. I stood atop a tall rooftop. The wind was soft and gentle as it brushed past my face, and for the first time in a long while, I felt calm. The suffocating pressure in my chest lifted, just at the thought of leaving this strange world behind. Sure, my little jump would disrupt their perfect engagement party, but I doubted anyone would mind such a minor hiccup. If anything, they might even cheer, celebrating the departure of the universally hated black sheep. I opened my arms and took in the rich, sweet scent of roses. My lips curved into a perfect smile. I stepped forward, ready to climb the railing again and embrace the earth below. And just then, a terrified voice called out from behind me, George, don't do anything stupid. Chapter 13. I paused mid-step. Here she was again, like a ghost that just wouldn't go away. Alicia. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she crept toward me inch by inch, the worry on her face so intense it was practically blinding. Her voice choked as she pleaded. George, don't do anything reckless. It's dangerous up here. Please. Just come down. Okay. As she said this, she kept her eyes locked on my every move, afraid to startle me, yet desperate to pull me back. Like a wounded cat begging for mercy, I frowned, watching her carefully. Even from a distance, I could see her trembling beneath her elegant dress. For a split second, I almost felt it. That tension, that connection, like real sibling affection, like she genuinely cared. But wasn't Alicia supposed to hate me more than anyone? What's with this sudden role reversal? I took another step forward. Half my body now hung over the edge of the rooftop. Alicia panicked. Her voice broke into a shout. George, don't. It was my fault before. I admit it. Just come down. Please, whatever you want, I'll agree to it. She looked completely unhinged. Tears in her bloodshot eyes. The updo in her carefully styled hair was now unraveling. Strands flying wildly in the wind. But just then, a voice cut through the moment like a knife. A woman's voice. Cold, smug, and perfectly ill-timed. George, aren't you just disgusting? You'll do anything to ruin this engagement party. Huh? I turned toward the sound. It was Willow, dressed in a custom-made gown, standing there like a queen crashing someone else's funeral. She was the daughter of the Liu family, the very one the original George used to love. Back when I skimmed the original plot, I saw the part where, during George's early days in the Wang household, rejected by everyone, he met Willow. Rich, beautiful, gentle, she was a ray of light in his bleak, beaten-down world. And with the Wangs and Lius planning to merge through marriage, if that child swap had never happened, Willow would have been betrothed to him. For a boy raised in an orphanage, falling for a girl like her was understandable. She was his son, but the truth was painfully obvious. Willow wasn't marrying a person, she was marrying the Wang family. And Makoto, the polished, legitimate heir, was the obvious choice. What chance did George, who had nothing, ever stand? So the light that once shone on him quickly turned away, choosing someone else to illuminate. It was doomed from the start, a love story that never had a future, a brutal reality that left George bleeding alone. Willow looked at me with utter disgust. When she saw me swaying on the rooftop's edge, her voice dripped with contempt. Go ahead and jump, George. If you don't, you're not even a man. Even if you do die, I won't care. Cling to me all you want. My heart has always, and will always, belong to Makoto. Alicia's eyes snapped wide. Without warning, she slapped Willow hard across the face and shouted, Willow, who the hell gave you the right to talk about my brother like that? Willow stood there stunned, hand pressed to her cheek, completely thrown. She clearly couldn't understand why Alicia, who had always hated me, was now suddenly defending me. She turned her hateful gaze on me, then practically melted into Makoto's arms like a delicate damsel, twisting everything around and aiming all the blame at me. Sneering, she snapped, George, what are you scheming now? Did you say something to Alicia to turn her against us? Let me make this clear. Makoto isn't just my fiancé, he saved my life, and I will only ever love him. Chapter 14. The moment those words left Willow's mouth, a clear, firm female voice cut through the air. The one who saved you that day, wasn't it George? The rooftop erupted instantly. Murmurs and gasps spread like wildfire. Even the bright spotlights couldn't hide how pale Makoto's face had turned, white as snow. The voice belonged to Anna, the girl I had saved back at the jewelry store. Unlike the frightened, trembling girl I remembered from that day, Anna now stood with her back straight, no more fear in her eyes, only firm trust, and a deep, unwavering worry as she looked at me. Willow blinked in surprise, then quickly scoffed. Even from halfway across the rooftop, I could feel the thick disgust rolling off her. She sneered. Really, George? To get my attention, you're even trying to steal credit for saving my life? Makoto, holding her in his arms, clenched his jaw. Then, trying to muster righteous indignation, he looked at me and said, Big brother, I know you've always wanted to fit into the Wang family, and I know I've taken the place that was supposed to be yours for 18 years, but it's a well-known fact that I saved Willow 2 months ago. I know you like her, if you want the credit. I'll give it to you. His voice was loud, clear, and filled with practiced sincerity, the kind that sounded noble enough to fool an audience. Willow's eyes turned red with emotion. Even Alicia looked momentarily dazed, doubt flickering in her eyes. Anna, however, rolled her eyes. She calmly pulled out her phone from her small handbag, unlocked it, and tapped on a video, then turned the screen for everyone to see. On display was the wreckage of a car accident, twisted metal scattered across the road, Willow, covered in blood, unconscious in the driver's seat. A figure, my figure, was struggling to pull her out from the wreck, then dialing emergency services with trembling fingers, though the streetlights in the suburbs were dim. Anna's phone camera had excellent resolution. My side profile was captured crystal clear. Even the faint scar on my ear was visible on screen. In the original book, this scene had only been mentioned briefly. Willow crashed into a highway divider outside the city. She'd hit her head and passed out. In a daze, she thought someone saved her. When she woke up, Makoto was by her bedside, so she naturally believed he was her savior. Fell even harder for him, and the engagement was moved up by months. Now Anna spoke again, defending me with visible anger. I may not be part of the Wong family, but even I've heard that George is the real son. He spent 18 years suffering outside, and when he finally came home a year ago, instead of being welcomed, he was treated like an outcast. He's only 19. What kind of despair must he have been in, to throw himself in front of a knife that day in the jewelry store, all just to protect me? Her voice trembled with emotion. The people around us began to murmur in disbelief and sympathy. On Anna's phone, the video played on loop, again and again. It showed my thin, malnourished body dragging Willow out of the crushed car, teeth clenched in pain, desperately moving her to a safe spot to avoid a gas explosion. Anna's gaze then turned to Makoto, whose face had gone ashen. Her tone turned icy cold as she added, "If I hadn't happened to be there, someone else might have successfully stolen credit for saving a life." Makoto's face was ghostly pale, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack, and in his eyes, that mask of false virtue finally cracked, revealing raw, bitter hatred underneath. Chapter 15. I cast a grateful glance at Anna. Even though I wasn't the original George, I wanted to thank her on his behalf. It was her, happening to be there, casually recording that video, who gave the original George the truth he'd been denied. If I ever run into him on the road to the afterlife, I'll make sure to tell him this good news. Willow instinctively pushed Makoto's arms off her. She stepped back, unsteady, eyes fixed on mine with disbelief. "George," she whispered. "So, the person who saved me that day was really you?" She began to inch closer to me, guilt and anguish all over her face. Her fingers trembled as she reached toward me, her voice shaking. "George, the rooftop's too dangerous. Please, come down. I swear I'll never misunderstand you again." Alicia quickly joined in, her voice tense with panic. "She's right, George. Come on, get down from there. It's not safe." Their concern didn't seem fake. For a moment, I genuinely wondered, did I accidentally steal the male lead script? But I wasn't in the mood to argue with either of them. I just wanted to log out of this storyline for good. The wind behind me howled like it was ready to take me away. In front of me, a sea of worried faces grew larger and larger. I couldn't wait any longer. I had no obligation to finish the rest of the hated by all plotline for the original protagonist. I could barely handle my own life. Why would I waste what little strength I had living someone else's? Heart hardening, I turned decisively and leapt over the edge, arms wide, body spinning in a clean triple flip, plummeting fast. Stars filled my eyes as the world blurred. Just before clearing the rooftop edge, I caught one last glance of Willow. Her expression, once filled with concern, instantly twisted into terror. She lunged toward me like she'd lost her mind, but only managed to grab the corner of my jacket. Screams erupted from behind as I slammed into the ground, but there was no pain. I wiggled my limbs. Everything was intact. Beneath me was something soft that shouldn't be right. This was the 5th floor, or higher. There should have been blood, broken bones, and probably death. Then, through the chaos, I heard Alicia's relieved voice ring out, "Thank God." I had someone set up an inflatable rescue mat down below. I was speechless. No wonder the fall didn't hurt at all. If the science show Mythbusters ever got hold of this case, they could probably make a whole 80-episode special just trying to explain how the hell I survived. I touched my heartbreakingly intact chest, let out a long sigh, and let my head fall sideways. This time, I actually passed out. Chapter 16. The scenery around me shifted. I felt as if I'd plunged into a surreal, dreamlike nightmare. In the dream, I was back again, wandering alone in the corner of a city. The neon world of nightlife, flashing signs and celebration. Always just out of reach through a curtain of fog. People passed me by without seeing me, one after another. I lived exactly as I had before I transmigrated, silent, unnoticed, commuting from one point to another. Each morning I opened my eyes, dull and dead, blending into the crowd alone, always alone. Suddenly, a car engine roared. It barreled toward me, tires screaming. I could have moved, but instead, for the first time in a while, I let out a long sigh, and chose to stay still. A harsh screech, brakes slamming. I opened my eyes again. I was back in the hospital. Not even a month in this world, And this was already my second hospital admission. When I came to, the room was full of people, all of them staring at me with worry. Only after seeing me awake did they begin to breathe again. Willow, her eyes red and swollen, clutched my hand tightly, as if terrified I'd vanish again. Choking back sobs, she said, "George, I'm so sorry. I misunderstood you. I was wrong. Please, please don't give up on yourself anymore. I know you've always loved me. I swear, once you recover, I'll marry you." I pulled my hand back warily and said, "Like you? When did I ever like you?" The one who liked her was the original George. If Willow turned into a pile of ashes right now, maybe she'd catch up with the real George, and they could have one of those unfinished love in the underworld kinds of tragic romances. But me, I'm just a wandering soul from another world. I have absolutely no interest in this woman, whom I've only met once. And to be honest, Willow's really nothing special. On the first day the original George returned to the Wong family, Willow had been radiant and charming, her eyes filled with subtle affection. Unlike those crude seductions that rely on cheap flirtation and physical bait, Willow's tactics were far more refined. She expertly read George's emotions, hooking him with thoughtful conversation, gentle cues, and well-timed sympathy. She quietly slipped into his heart without him even realizing it. He'd make a joke, she'd laugh softly, he'd mention something, she'd respond just right. She followed him like a sweet, admiring shadow, her eyes full of unspoken devotion. And always, she reminded him of the upcoming union between the Wong and Liu families. But while sticking close to George, she kept a close eye on how the Wong family treated him. She wasn't sure which mattered more, the blood-related heir, or the fake son they had raised for 18 years. The answer became clear fast. The Wongs didn't care for the real one, and the moment Willow realized that, she drew a sharp line and switched sides, pouring all her charm on Makoto. The two of them would stand outside the Grand Wong villa, smiling as they watched George being treated like dirt. To me, Willow is like mud on the bottom of a shoe, unpleasant and unlucky to step in. Maybe the chill in my eyes was too obvious, because Willow shivered slightly. She tried to suppress her unease and forced a shaky smile. "George, how could you not like me? If you didn't, why would you save me like that? And the whole rooftop thing, you jumped because I was getting engaged, didn't you?" Mr. and Mrs. Wong, sniffling on the sidelines, quickly chimed in with teary voices. "Yes, George, once you're better, we'll change the will. You can marry Willow happily, okay?" That building was so high. How could you be so cruel to jump from it? Don't you know, every time I close my eyes, all I see is you falling from that rooftop. Mrs. Wong sobbed. "It's true, I've neglected you all these years." I stared coldly at this whole performance. Late affection, late romance. All of it was like stale bread, covered in moldy yellow fuzz, sickening to even look at. No matter how hungry I was, I wouldn't touch it. Expressionless, I closed my eyes, voice flat and emotionless. I issued my final order. "I'm not feeling well. Mr. Wong, Mrs. Wong, Miss Liu, please leave." Through the blanket, I heard muffled sobs from Mrs. Wong, and Alicia's soft, pleading words, trying to comfort me. In the end, all I caught was a whisper, uncertain and sorrowful. "George, I'm sorry." Chapter 17. The noisy crowd finally dispersed, and I once again looked around the hospital room. It was clearly a VIP ward. The windows were sealed tight, impossible to open. No wonder they left so confidently. It was already late into the night, and the once bustling city was now left with only streetlights casting dim patches of yellow. Curled up in the hospital bed, I rubbed my perpetually suffocated heart. Though it beat strongly, it always felt like something was missing. Nothing excited me anymore. Even the simplest tasks, getting up, washing my face, required countless pep talks before I could barely muster the will to move. It felt like an invisible hand had a tight grip on my chest, making it impossible to breathe. In my heart, I calculated how best to avoid those people so I could continue with my plan to fake my death and disappear from everyone's life. Suddenly, the door to the ward burst open. A slender figure appeared in front of me. She carried with her a chill in the air and immediately pressed a knife against my throat. With a dark expression, she said, "George, what kind of crap are you pulling again?" I stared at her, completely confused. I had no idea what she was talking about, but feeling the cold blade against my neck, a wave of joy surged through me. Perfect. Just when it felt like all hope was lost, here came a silver lining. Tonight, I could finally fulfill my dream of disappearing, escaping the curse of being the universally hated one. Let the next unlucky soul deal with this hellish storyline. My eyes shifted, and I suddenly lowered my head, aiming to slice my own neck. But in the next second, the coldness vanished. She had retracted the knife. I was speechless. She frowned. "What are you doing?" Annoyed, I snapped. "Just do it already. Kill me." She was clearly angered by my reaction. fuming. Shut up, I'm not here to play games with you. Tell me honestly, where did you take Makoto, after you ruined the engagement party? Makoto suddenly vanished. His phone was found smashed at the venue. Was it you? Did you secretly hire someone to kidnap him? You're the only one who's always had a problem with him. Who else would do it? George, what kind of nonsense did you feed everyone else to make them believe it wasn't you? That's when I finally snapped out of it. Kidnapping. Something that expensive, you think someone as hated and broke as me could pull that off? Just yesterday, I checked the original George's phone balance. A pitiful 20 yuan left. And to top it off, this morning, his streaming app auto-renewed its membership, 19 yuan gone. Now there's only 1 yuan left. I can't even afford a shady lymph node meat bun. Where would I get the money to hire